everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Kaikala. I'm the Executive Director of Washington Business Week. Thank you all for joining us. Joined with me today is Jenna Lusk, our Director of Operations, and our speaker, who I'm going to introduce. So for Travis, growing up meant dealing with lots of persistent stress. As a small kid, he dealt with physical and sexual abuse from a close family friend. As he got older, he struggled with obesity and endured years of teasing and bullying because of it. At his heaviest, at 17, he weighed 305 pounds. And at that point, he had been dieting for 7 years, but hadn't been able to make any real progress. But that year, in 2000, he was finally able to make some changes in his diet and lost 80 pounds in 8 months. He once thought of himself as a character development coach. He thought he needed that title, but he says he's not a coach. He's a writer that is fascinated with how we can better solve problems in everyday life. The goal of his writing is to flesh out the problem-solving process in various parts of life in order to help people find the confidence to believe they can solve any problem that they encounter in this journey of life. Here is Travis.
Andrea, thank you for that introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. See here. And can you all see that first slide?
Yeah.
Okay. So life is about problem solving. Like Andrea said, you all can subscribe via email at my website, travisdaigle.com. And to go into what Andrea said already a little bit further with a little bit more detail here, the picture you see on the left-hand side of your screen is me in January of 2000. I'm 17 years old and I'm 305 pounds in that picture. There had been 7 years of lots of trial and error, lots of trying different things to lose weight, but unable successfully to do so until that year, until I was able to finally make some changes in my diet. And the picture you see on your right-hand side is me in Afghanistan in 2011. I'm with my team of fellow Green Berets there. I'm a Special Forces medic in that picture. We were deployed to Afghanistan for about a year there. And the interesting thing about kind of the opposition of these pictures is the person on your left-hand side is a very timid kid, very easily intimidated, lacking in confidence in a lot of ways. And just really struggling to figure out who he was in the world. And the person on your right-hand side is very different, much more self-confident, much more sure of himself. But the interesting irony is the fact that a lot of the lessons that I learned through weight loss and a lot of the stress that I endured as a kid were the same things that helped me get through all the difficult military training that I went through, and ultimately helped me become successful in becoming a Green Beret and deploying to combat. And so what I've come to learn over the years is a lot of what helped me succeed in life when faced with various challenges has a lot to do with my problem solving skills. And whether that was weight loss, whether that was graduating from college with my engineering degree, whether that was paying off debt after I left engineering and went into some financial trouble, or whether that was joining the military, or now being a business owner and a writer, it all involves problem solving skills. And I know often you may, teenagers hear adults talk about things like being resilient or being more patient or having certain positive character traits. And I think all those things are great and all those things are good, and we should aspire to have patience. We should aspire to have courage. But I've come to find that it kind of depends on what it is you want out of life. For instance, I spent 7 years trying and failing to lose weight. I would argue that it took a lot of patience to do that. When I graduated college with my engineering degree, I only spent 11 months actually working as an engineer, and I decided that I wanted to walk away from that. Some people might think that that was impatient. Um, for me, the issue was with weight loss, this was something that I really wanted, so I persisted. With engineering, I began to realize that it wasn't something that I wanted as much, and so I decided to cut ties with it when I had the realization for myself. And what I'm going to go into more with that story and that evolution of that story is the decisions I made and why I made those choices, and how I use the same problem solving skills that I developed as a kid dealing with obesity to help me deal with similar challenges later on in life. And if I go to the next slide here, one of the things that I've noticed in my own life and as I look at other people's lives is there are two types of problems. One, there are practical problems, and then there are story problems. So a practical problem is more like something tangible, some kind of tangible challenge related to the goals and that you have in life and to life in general. So right now, one of our biggest practical problems as a society is COVID-19 and the changes that we have to make in order to mitigate some of the issues around it. So for instance, doing this webinar versus last summer being able to do a live presentation with all of the kids in the room and all of the adults in the room. And so that's like a practical challenge. But then the second type of challenge is a little bit more hard to pin down, and it's what I call story problems. And this isn't a new idea. It's something that I think has been around for a long time. But story problems are intangible challenges related to your goals and life in general. And what I mean by story is our ideas and assumptions about how life should work. And the challenges we experience with our ideas and assumptions are usually mental and emotional challenges. So again, using COVID-19 as an example, and using some of you young people as an example, is right now, let's say if you're a senior in high school, maybe you were looking forward to graduation, to the ceremony of graduation. Maybe you're an athlete, for instance, and maybe this second half of the year, I'm not sure what sports play in this time of year, but if you were a football player, basketball player, maybe you were looking at a college scholarship in one of those athletic endeavors, that's possibly interrupted big time now because of COVID-19. And maybe the ideas that you had in your head about here's what I'm going to do next have been totally kind of upended by this health crisis that we're in. And that can cause a lot of mental and emotional challenges. One of the, for myself, for example, is I'm very big into mixed martial arts, and I like training for mixed martial arts. And I was training at a gym there in Tacoma for 6 months and doing well and progressing well. And then this happened all of a sudden, and all the gyms closed down. And so I've had to learn how to train on my own and learn into looking into different methods of improving myself. But initially it was frustrating. And I think a lot of us are experiencing that right now. And so you want to think about those two problems, and the reality is they're very much tied together. They coincide. And so what I always say is when you set a goal, usually there's some practical things that you have to figure out. But then within that, it'll present you with some story problems. So for me, weight loss, for instance, there was 7 years of trial and error in trying to solve various problems related to that. But in terms of what was happening in my mind and my heart and in my emotions was dealing with the teasing and the bullying, dealing with the constant year after year failure, and feeling a lack of confidence and wondering were things ever going to change. Like those were the story problems that I was dealing with as I was trying to solve the practical problem of losing weight. And the key there is, like I said, having goals will create problems you choose, and then life will present problems that you don't choose. And for me, what I've learned over time is, especially in this day and age, as we talk more and more about mental health and about well-being, is I think, and I have and this is a theory, and you know, it's hard for me to prove with tangible evidence, but I think the more confidence that you have in your ability to solve problems, both practical problems and also problems with your story, the less intimidated you'll be by potential problems that come up in the future. And so for me, when just to go back into my story a little bit, is when I graduated from college in 2005, I graduated with an engineering degree. Now, I had already gone through the weight loss process. So I'll go back to that picture I had on the screen. But I'd already gone through the weight loss process, and I'd lost about 100 pounds. And so I'm down to about 200 pounds. I'm feeling great. I'm graduating engineering school. And one of the stories that I had in my head was, if I got this good job as an engineer, then life would be a lot better. So growing up, I went through a lot of intense, stressful experiences with bullying and teasing and abuse. And part of the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, was getting my engineering degree, getting a good job, and being able to provide for myself, maybe do some things for my parents, so on and so forth. And what I discovered when I started working was, it just wasn't true for me. I didn't really like being an engineer. I didn't like going to the office every day, and I didn't like sitting at a desk every day. Practically, it just wasn't good for me. And I think I was burned out in a lot of ways. And so what happened to me is, the ideas that I had about life were being challenged. The ideas and assumptions that I had about life were being challenged in a really big way, because I'd kind of done everything that you're supposed to do. I had gotten a really good degree, and I'd gotten a really high paying job for someone fresh out of college. I was making, at the time, I was making $60,000 a year fresh out of college. And so the challenge with that was, everything in my environment, and to include the people in my environment, everybody was telling me that I should be happy. I should be grateful that I had such a good job. I should be grateful that I finished my engineering degree. But that wasn't what I was experiencing inside. Inside my mind and in my emotions, I was having a disconnect. I was feeling as though I didn't want to carry on for an entire career as an engineer. And I was also scared because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And I was also scared because I just made the mistake of getting a car loan almost immediately once I got my new job as an engineer, because my old car from college was breaking down a lot. And so I had the debt from my car loan. I also had my student loan debt, and I had some credit card debt that I had to deal with. So what it felt like was, it felt like the walls were closing in terms of how many options that I had. And over time, during that 11-month period, I got really depressed and even mildly suicidal for a little bit there, because I felt like I had no direction or no way that I could turn to get out of this situation. And part of what I want people to take away from this presentation, and to take away from the content and the writing on my website, is, if you can practice critical thinking and problem solving with all the little problems that we experience in everyday life, then you get more confident that as you meet bigger problems in life, or as big things happen, for instance, like a pandemic, or you lose your job, or maybe a relationship falls apart, or you have a health challenge, you gain more confidence in your ability to approach those things and overcome those things, which I think makes you more resilient, and makes you less prone to get into severe bouts of depression. It's not that you won't ever be depressed or won't ever be sad in life, but I think what begins to happen is you feel confidence that you can overcome any obstacle. And so if we look at the problem solving process, as far as I look at it, the first thing I always try to get people to think about is taking control or taking ownership of the issue. And to me, that's kind of a three-part process. One, what's the goal? Two, what are the conditions that I'm trying to achieve the goal in? And then three, understanding that what I'm really running is an experiment. I have an idea about how I can get to what I want, and I'm going to go test that idea out in the real world, and I'm going to learn some things. So for me at the time, again, it was, I think, 2006 when I decided to quit engineering. And at that time, my goal was very simple. I wanted to find a job that allowed me to be both physical and to use my mind as well. And so, but I had some conditions that I had to deal with. So what I think I want is, I think I want to do something physical, and I think I want that physical job to include using my mind. And I also wanted to do something where I felt like I was serving other people. And so initially what I thought about was personal training. But the problem was in step 2, what are the conditions? So what was true for me at the time was when I walked away from being an engineer, I had to give up my car for repossession, which means I had about $13,000 that I owed on a car loan. I had credit cards that went into default because I couldn't pay the bills. And then I also had my student loans. So ultimately, I had about $60,000 in debt that I had to pay back. And I couldn't go be a personal trainer right away because I wouldn't have an income right away, because it takes time to build an income as a personal trainer. So I still want to serve people. I still want to use my body, and I still want to use my mind, but I need an income right away. So it was 2007 at the time. We were in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I think the wars were pretty much at their height at that time. And I decided that I wanted to go be a combat medic. And because I knew I could solve my money problem while also meeting these other goals that I had. And so the idea was very simple for me. Let's experiment with joining the military. Let's see what this is like for the next 5 or 6 years. And let's see what I learn about myself. And the military ended up being a great experience for me because it just showed me so many things about my character that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And this is why I'm not big on calling myself a character development coach anymore, because character traits are so intangible and subjective based upon what you want out of life. And life in many ways is this process of self-discovery. And what the military allowed me to see was all of the challenging experiences that I had as a kid had actually made me very resilient against problems that I would experience in the military and in the future as well. And so dealing with bullying and teasing on a consistent basis made it very easy for me to deal with the instructors and the drill sergeants in that military environment who are trying to stress you out and trying to see if you'll crack under pressure. And I had already developed that skill as a little kid, and so I just transferred it to that new problem. And also just getting the time to reset myself financially and really think about what I might want to do beyond the military. And so when I got out of the military, I had paid off all my debts, and I'd saved up a bunch of money as well. And that allowed me to start experimenting with personal training when I got out of the military in 2012. And then what I learned there is kind of what has led me to what I do today. Is as I was working with people on trying to lose weight like I had done so many years before, what I realized is that people were struggling with problem solving. And often that meant getting bogged down in certain ideas and assumptions that they were making that were not true. And that's why that third piece of the problem solving process is so important: experimentation. You want to have sort of the humility to recognize that all your ideas and assumptions aren't true. And life is going to present you with scenarios that kind of upend or cut off those ideas and assumptions. So if you have a goal, we want to say maybe the goal can be achieved like this, maybe leaving room for failure. So when I was learning trial and error how to lose weight for 7 years, it was just a series of failures. And with each failure, I was learning what worked and what didn't work. Same thing with engineering. I had this idea in my head that if I got a good job as an engineer, that then life would be good after that, and I'd be satisfied, not be fulfilled. But that wasn't true. And then sometimes the second part there is you end up assessing the original goal in the experiment. When I was in college and when I was in high school, the goal was to be an engineer. But as I hit this point of depression and lots of anxiety, and having, like I said before, some suicidal thoughts. I had to reassess what I was chasing and what my goals were. And and what that does is that takes you back around to steps 1 and 2. Reassessing the goal goes back to what is the goal? What do I think I want? And then 2, asking what the conditions are. What's true in the situation? And once I was out of debt, the cool thing about the conditions is once I didn't have creditors calling me every day and the stress of knowing that I had to pay somebody, it gave me a lot more room to experiment with different things, which gave me the space to start getting into speaking and writing and so on and so forth, and not needing an income right away because I didn't have those bills knocking down my door.
Travis, we have a question for you before you move on.
Go for it.
In addition to, I know you mentioned fitness in the military, outside the problem-solving process, is there any other external factors that help you reach your goals?
Let's see. Well, I think there's always, how do I say this? I'll give you just an example, because there's always kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, like just random kind of serendipity or you might call it a blessing or a gift, from God or something like that. You might use those words to describe it, or you might call it luck or random chance. But things have to go in your favor, have to or will go in your favor sometimes. So with the military, for instance, I had no idea when I joined the military that they were doing this thing at the time where you could either take the GI Bill or you could get your student loans repaid. And so you had a choice. Do I want to go back to school, or do I want to get my loans? If I have loans, can I get them repaid? And so when I got ready to sign my contract, so remember, I was $60,000 in debt. And I had no idea about any of these things before I made the choice to go serve. But when I got ready to sign my contract, my recruiter said, yeah, do you want to go back to school or you want to get your loans paid off? I was like, of course, I want to get my loans paid off. And then he was also like, oh, by the way, because you're taking on this combat role, there's a big bonus associated with it. And I was like, well, what's the bonus? And he goes, it's $38,000. And I was like, oh, so I mean, my loans were $20,000, and here's this, and I had another $40,000 of debt, and almost like that, it was taken care of. And so, like, there is, nobody gets to where they are on their own. Like, so, I mean, even just the fact that we're here in this time, right, and we can do technology. I didn't have to invent computers. I doubt anybody else on the call had to invent computers, so there's a lot of, just being in this time has its gifts that we didn't have to create. So I would say that would be my answer to that question.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this moment, or can I go ahead?
No questions yet.
Okay. So yeah. So again, that process of self-discovery is important, and with that, when we talk about talking about character, because I know it's something that comes up a lot, and I get asked about this by teachers from time to time, and what I've realized is it's highly dependent upon the individual, and so I try to encourage people that the word grit, I think we often think of nowadays as kind of a sign of something that has to do with persistence, a willingness to take on difficult challenges, so on and so forth. But I think character is a little bit more nuanced than we give it credit for sometimes. And it really is on the person to understand themselves well. One of the most difficult things for me walking away from engineering was dealing with the criticism that came from the people closest to me. So criticism from my friends, parents, and my coworkers at the time. I mean, being called ungrateful or stupid or ridiculous for wanting to walk away from such a quote unquote good scenario. But the key is it wasn't good for me. And so what I had to really do in that moment, because because I had to develop the self-confidence to trust myself. And the challenge for me was I was still struggling in many ways with my confidence just from the experiences that I had as a little kid. So it was difficult to have everybody criticizing me for my decision, while at the same time trusting myself to move forward with that decision. And so trusting your instincts is very much a learned skill. And now is the time, as young people or whatever age you are and you're watching this, like now is the time to begin experimenting with that and begin developing that. Because that time in my life was a big lesson in trusting my gut and going with my own internal compass. And you have to define what success is for you. You can't lean on the understanding that society has, or what your friends think success is, or what your family thinks success is, or even later on in life when you get married, what your partner thinks success is. Like, you really have to know yourself well enough to be able to choose appropriately for yourself, because I think at the end of the day, that's the only way you're going to feel satisfied with your decision making. So really practicing that skill of self-awareness and knowing yourself. And I think that happens through problem solving. And the two big takeaways that I want everybody to take from today is, one, you want to develop your problem solving skills in every part of your life. I think almost every moment of every day gives us a problem to solve, whether it be like the technology challenges that we had today in getting the webinar up and running. I used to talk to people at the gym all the time about getting up early in the morning to make it to the gym to work out. Like, that's a problem you got to solve. That's the practical problem of getting enough sleep and going to bed at night and getting your schedule set up appropriately. And then it's the story problem of, do I have the discipline? Do I have the willpower? Do I have the strength and resolve to accomplish this task? Because in the morning when you get up early and you're not used to it, I mean, it can be a shocker for a lot of people, even just a 1 hour difference, and trying to make that habit adjustment. And so you want to take all those little opportunities to observe yourself and observe the way you think. And then the second thing I think I want people to take away from this is, have the courage to have your own definition of success, to define your own goals for yourself, in spite of what other people may think, and then have the humility to let it collapse, i.e. have the humility to recognize that your stories and your assumptions and your ideas about life, some of them are just wrong, and it's okay to be wrong. And just if you have the built-in courage to set a course and the humility to recognize that you're going to fall sometimes, like I said, I think it makes problems a lot less intimidating. And if you all want to read more, as I kind of go through, again, various parts of life, whether it be health, finances, relationships, career choices, all the little things in life that, the little challenges that life presents to us, please go subscribe via email at my blog. It's at my website, travisdaigle.com. And it's all about developing those critical thinking skills to take on any problem and know that you can adapt and overcome.
I have another question for you, Travis. How do you gain the willpower if you don't have it in the moment? Let's say if you want to go for a long run, how do you make yourself?
How do you make yourself? I think well, so again, practical problem and story problem. And so without knowing the background of the person who asked the question, the first thing I would ask is, why does it have to be a long run? Why can't you say to yourself, you know what, let's try, I don't feel like running today, but I'm gonna try running down the block. And then when I get there, we'll see what happens. Like, do I want to keep going? Okay, yeah. Do I not? Okay, we go home, but at least we ran somewhere today. So maybe I didn't get the big thing that I had in my mind, but I did take one step, and that gets your momentum going. And eventually eventually you don't have a problem anymore going on that long run, or eventually you've gone on so many long runs that when you don't feel like it, you do it anyway because you have it.
And I think I actually read that incorrectly, Travis. They actually meant if you don't have it in the moment, how do you have the willpower in the future?
Well, I mean, and I think, yeah, I think that's learning how to break big goals down into small things and being patient enough to chip away at the small milepost, if you will.
Thank you.
And then, Travis, how do you take care of yourself when you fail?
So I think a big thing for me that I've learned over the years is again, I guess one, I just, how do I say this? I mean, one, I just don't care what other people think. And so I mean, that changes everything. Like that changes when you stop caring what other people think. And it's not that I don't care at all. It's more about, I've learned over the years to be good at filtering out the truth from people's opinion. And so growing up as a kid, because here's the reality. I think what makes failure so painful is we have these ideas about what people will think about us when we fail. So I don't want to start a business because what if I fail? I don't want to try that sport because what if I fail? I don't want to play this instrument because what if I fail? And so, I mean, our ideas, like if there was no one else in the world, you didn't have to worry about people's opinions, you'd probably try a lot of different things. And so the idea for me was growing up as a kid, when I get criticized so much for my weight, over the years, for better or for worse, it kind of made me callous to people's opinions. And so when people criticize me, I try to hear the facts in their statement. Travis, you suck as a speaker. Well, that's an opinion. Well, Travis, you stutter a lot. That might be true. That might be a real thing that I need to work on. So to me, failure is often connected to ideas in our head about who we are in the sight of other people. And so what I've learned to do is love myself enough to not worry about how someone judges me. And I think practicing that self-awareness and that self-love is kind of the way I take care of myself when I fail.
Travis, do you have any advice for our young people how they can motivate their parents to problem solve and be healthy?
Oh man, this is not going to be a popular answer. So I come from a fairly obese family. I would say that's in our, if there is such a genetic trait, then my family might have it. But I also grew up in the South. Food is very like rich and I'd say decadent in the South. So my parents are overweight, and for a long time after I lost all that weight, I kind of thought like surely they'll lose weight too because their son lost weight. And what I began to realize is people have to want it for themselves. You can't make somebody want anything, and you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to make somebody want something. So the best thing you can do is set the example. That is the best thing you can do is set the example. And then maybe one day your family member might ask you a question, and you have to not be preachy, be empathetic, and just answer their question. But the best thing you can do is get up every day and set the example.
All right. Do we have any more questions? We'll give it just a minute here. All right. Looks like we are all done. Thank you, Travis, so much for your insight and your wisdom. Thank you everyone for joining us and sticking with us through our hiccups on the webinar we got here. That's great. I want to draw your attention to next week. We're going to learn about emotional intelligence with Gail Johnson. And then we will have the CFO of Starbucks Japan talk to us about international business after COVID-19. And to wrap up the series, we have leadership and COVID-19. And so I hope to see you here for the next 3 Wednesdays at 10:30. And don't forget to sign up for camp. Registration is open for June, July, and August. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.